Canon R3 is a hybrid camera, but it's clearly aimed at professional photography scenarios, especially those leveraging its terrific drive speed and outstanding autofocus. But what I find most interesting is that it's also Canon's least encumbered hybrid when it comes to video functionality as well. Usually Canon serves up a handful of peculiar video limitations with their hybrid cameras, encouraging to look toward their Cine line. And there are still a couple of those limitations here, but they're much less significant. So today I want to celebrate all of the successes Canon has achieved with this R3 when it comes to video as a way to hopefully encourage seeing more of that in future hybrids, as well as discuss a few minor things that I think could still use improvement. Before that though, for disclosure, this video is not sponsored by Canon. In fact, I didn't even borrow this camera from them. I borrowed it from Camera Canada, so thank you to them. Big fan of that store. They get my highest recommendation. I didn't get paid by either of those parties to make this video, and this camera will be going back to Camera Canada when I'm done with the video. This video does have a sponsor though, and that's Storyblocks. Okay, so number one on my list of 5 major improvements for video is the removal of the internal record limits. There's no 29-minute, 59-second time limit, and there's no thermal countdown like you'd find on the R5. This is huge. I've been complaining for a long time of why does Canon still have that 30-minute record limit? And they also added Sony's high temperature shutoff setting in the menu that lets you record for longer and it getting hotter if you use it on tripod or whatever. Now keep in mind, I do live in Canada and it's winter, so it's not that hot outside. In fact, the warmest this camera's been exposed to is room temperature plus the lights heating up the environment. So I don't know, 24 degrees Celsius. But within that, I haven't been able to get it to overheat no matter what I did. In fact, it would either be the battery that would die or the card would run out of space before I would even get a heat warning. So no issues there whatsoever, which is terrific. And I wanted to sort of see if I could make it run longer by using USB power to erase the battery life issue. And that does work. Note on that, by the way. It seems like you can actively power it a little bit while the camera's on. When I was using my meter, it was drawing 7.5 watts over USB-C power delivery, and that's using a 100-watt charger. But when I turned the camera off, it went to 0 watts. So it doesn't seem like you can charge the battery with the camera off, but you can supply sort of additional trickle power while the camera's on, and that does extend the runtime. However, even with that USB powering and with the removal of the time limit and the overheating, there is still sort of a limit on the record duration, which is my first in my list of 5 things that I think need improvement, which is that the relay recording on this camera just doesn't really make a lot of sense. So there is a feature in the menu that lets you adjust what you do with the card slots. So there's 2 different card slots here. There's a CF Express Type B and an SD card. And I like that they have that variety. You can't do everything on the SD card slot. You can't do RAW. You can't do some of the all-infra at high frame rates. And you can't do the 120p mode. And that's fine. No big deal. Record those as CF Express Type B. But in the menu, you'll see that there's an option called Auto Switch When Card Full. And on Sony cameras and other cameras, that means that when the card's full, it switches to the other slot. And in that, you can even swap out the first card then for an empty one, and it'll keep swapping back and forth. Not on this camera. That setting is so weird. When you fill up the first card, it switches to the second card, but it still stops recording and says the first card's full. So what the auto switch means is then you can press record again, and the camera intuitively knows to use the second card. But I mean, that's not really that great of it. That's not really auto switching. It still stops and you have to start again, but it starts again on the second card. And you can't even hot swap because as soon as you open the door, just like previous Canon cameras, the camera sort of shuts off. So you can't swap out cards for relay recording. So there really is no true relay recording on this camera. The closest they've got is that you can press record a second time when it fills up the first card to then start recording on the second card. But if you don't catch it, you're going to have a lapse in your recording there, a blackout period. So that's the hard limit. The hard limit on this camera is not heat, which is great. It's not a time limit, which is great. It's not even really power related. It's how big of a card can you get and how big of a card can you afford, because CF Express Type B isn't really cheap. And if you want to record for a really long time, you're going to need to get 512 gig, which again is going to be expensive. But I'd say the biggest way they could improve this is honestly just getting rid of this weird card door shuts off the camera thing, because then we could always just swap out another fresh card. But you can't do that with this camera. Okay, back to the good stuff. My number 2 video success is the rolling shutter, or rather the lack of it. This camera has absolutely fantastic rolling shutter performance. And I think this is pretty significant because if you think about it, there's not a lot of other hybrid cameras out there that offer a 6K oversampled full frame readout with the frame rates and codec options that this camera has and doesn't have a rolling shutter problem. It might be the only non-cine camera that does that. Because if you think about it, the A7S III doesn't have those issues, but it doesn't oversample from 6K. The A7 IV oversamples from 6K, it's got terrible rolling shutter, and it crops in 4K 60. Panasonic's crop in 4K 60. The A1 doesn't crop in anything, but it doesn't oversample in those modes. So I don't know if there's another camera that does it all, that up to 4K 60, oversamples from 6K, and doesn't have rolling shutter problems. Bravo, Canon. That's terrific. But for my complaint number 2, I still don't love the IBIS. Now, I'd rather have great rolling shutter and bad IBIS than good IBIS and terrible rolling shutter, because we've seen that makes a big difference. But I wouldn't say that it's bad. It feels a lot like the R5. So if you've liked the R5's IBIS, then I think you're fine over here. Just it still has those wobble issues with wide angle lenses. And there's still some stuff where, even with not wide angles, where it just feels like it kind of drifts weirdly or like moves. I was doing a shot where I was walking with the camera and kind of doing a little bit of like a parallax while walking in slow motion. And at one point you couldn't even tell that I was walking, which is weird because I didn't want to see the motion. It was like it locked off the frame. And then when I stopped walking, it like shot the frame back. It reminds me of the enhanced modes that some IBIS have, where you're supposed to use it like a human tripod. And it does that extremely well. But when you want to have some kind of fluid motion, it doesn't really let you fine tune that, which is sort of another complaint, is that when you have a lens on it that has image stabilization in the lens, all the control just defaults to the switch on the lens. And I think more refinement in the menu that lets you go, I'd rather have dual, I'd rather have single, I'd rather have just the body, just the lens. I think that would make a big difference, especially if you want to use it in different applications. But you're kind of stuck with it all on or all off. There's that electronic add-on thing, which does actually make a difference. But if we're talking about sort of organic movement, I don't find that this is the best IBIS for that, but it does work great for just human tripod or for stills mode. So do with that what you want. Now, moving on to the number 3 best feature about this camera for video is the ability to download stock footage from a terrific library. Wait a minute. That's not about the camera. That's about today's sponsor, Storyblocks. So sometimes you don't have the shot you need, and there's no way you're going to be able to go out and get it before you run out of time, run out of money, or run out of patience by completely derailing your creative momentum. And that's where Storyblocks comes in. They've got subscriptions for every budget that give you access to a vast, royalty-free library with unlimited downloads, allowing you to use the footage worry-free for both personal and commercial projects. They're also focused on enriching their catalog with diverse and inclusive content to provide useful assets to creatives with varying needs and audiences. And this is all easily accessed using their intuitive interface with filters for 4K video at multiple frame rates, along with backgrounds and After Effects templates. If you've never browsed Storyblocks before, I think you'll be truly impressed by just how exhaustive their library is, and I encourage you to learn more about them by using the link in the description below. Okay, now for my real number 3 best feature about this camera, the improved dynamic range. In the past, Canon's photo cameras have had somewhat unimpressive dynamic range in video, likely limited by their second-tier log cameras that they provide versus what you'd see on their cine cameras, which end up reducing their scores to somewhere between 10.5 to 11 stops in Imatest. Well, I busted out the Xyla 21 again, and the R3, when shooting C-Log 3, scores much closer to 12 stops. It doesn't seem to matter if you shoot RAW or IPB, whether you jump up to 60 frames per second, etc. All instances we're getting between 11.7 to 12 stops of dynamic range with a signal-noise ratio of 2. This still isn't the best in the hybrid mirrorless world, but it's a full stop more than what we were getting before in the R5 and R6, and that makes a noticeable difference. And I think the limiting factor here is probably still the C-Log 3. I wish Canon would give us C-Log 2 as an option. I think that this camera can handle it, and all the recording modes are 10-bit 422, and I think there's more room to play in this sensor. I'll show you some push-pull tests maybe while I'm talking over this so you can see what I'm talking about. But the fact that it didn't really matter how I changed things, it seemed limited more by the log gamma than it did by the sensor itself. So I think C-Log 2 would make a difference. But I also want to let you guys know not to fall into that trap. I've seen a lot of YouTube videos that say, well, if you shoot RAW on Canon, you can go into, say, the DaVinci Resolve RAW panel and switch it to C-Log 2. You cannot. If you switch it to C-Log 2, you're getting C-Log, not C-Log 3, just C-Log. And you can tell this by just looking at a waveform and switching between C-Log, C-Log 2, and C-Log 3. See that C-Log 2 looks exactly the same as C-Log, and it should look flatter and more dynamic rangy, and it doesn't. So the best you're going to get on this camera is C-Log 3 for now, until Canon unlocks it. And if they do, I think we might see even more dynamic range out of cameras like this. So I wish that they would do that instead of reserving it just for the cine line. But now for my number 3 complaint. This camera has micro HDMI. This is a huge body. The ergonomics are great. It feels great in the hand. There's nice textures, tons of customizable buttons and dials. There's a flip screen and all the ports you need. But micro HDMI, come on. My number 4 best feature, however, is the ISO range integrity. Cycling through the ISO range on this camera is a dream. It maintains color quality and white balance throughout the range. The noise increases in logical steps, and there's no weird exposure jumps that require additional correction in post. I did notice the noise cleanup when switching from ISO 2500 to 3200, so I think your two natives are going to be 800 and 3200 when shooting log. But ISO 12800 also cleans up a tad and makes it look similar to 6400. And this was even in RAW, so I don't think it's just increasing noise reduction or something like that. And speaking of that color, the color accuracy is great, and the process is a breeze, just like it is on the Cine line. The support page for the R3 has the official Canon LUTs available for download, and in there you can use the C-Log 3 Cinema Gamut to Rec 709 wide LUT for a one-step process to a great-looking image with accurate, vibrant color. But my number 4 complaint is still about the custom white balance tool. I was excited when I heard that the R3, and now I think the R5 with the firmware update, has a live view, easy custom white balance tool to finally catch up to all the other manufacturers in this regard. But then I found out it's only available in stills mode. If anything, I'd argue this function is more important for video than stills. Canon, please port this over to video. We need it. Right now in its current state, the only way to set a custom white balance for video is you have to take a photo of a gray thing or a white thing and then load that photo up. And it's ridiculous. Every other camera has a reticle. You just move onto a thing and go, that's my target, and that sets the white balance. And the auto white balance engine is great in these Canon cameras. There's just no way to target it specifically in video. And I think we need that. So I tested out the new live function in the photo. It works great. Just make it available for video. Okay, my last and number 5 best thing about the R3 for video is just the general 4K experience. It's such a relief and allows for focusing on the parts of a shoot that matter when your camera just works without a lot of fuss. And the Canon R3 just works when it comes to 4K video. It doesn't matter what frame rate you choose, it's always a sharp, oversampled image with 10-bit color and a full frame readout. No crops, no sampling changes, no color compromises in certain modes. It's just the same great image all the time with a 24p or 60p. Now, as a note, there is a crop mode if you want to engage that by choice, but you're not forced to crop, and it doesn't crop automatically for you when you change frame rates. So it's seamless, and you can just get the shot you need in a hurry and not have to worry about it. And the interface for choosing that is also probably the best in the business, and I wish other manufacturers would copy what Canon is doing here. You don't need multiple menus, just one intuitive touchscreen. Choose your resolution and your aspect ratio. Kudos, by the way, for offering DCI. Then choose your frame rate. Again, kudos for true 24p. And then choose your compression. And kudos for including all intra. It's that easy. Tap 3 things and you're rolling with no worries about how that affected your image negatively and how to compensate for it. My only complaint about that, and my number 5 complaint in general, would be that the 120p mode has a 30p base. Unless I'm completely missing something, it appears that when you enable 120p high frame rate mode, it automatically defaults to a 30p base frame rate, meaning it slows your footage down in camera to 25% speed and results in a 29.97 frames per second clip. I find it weird that I can't choose the sub rate here. Why not give the option to choose 20% down to 24p or 50% down to 60p? There's also no audio in the 120p mode, but I'm used to that and that's not a big issue. What is great though is that the quality doesn't drop that much in the 120p mode, as it's still 4K and looks much better than the 1080p 120 that we've seen on previous Canon cameras. All right, that's it. That's my list. Overall, I think this camera represents a huge step forward for Canon when it comes to hybrid video functionality. We need to keep in mind, however, that this is an expensive body, and I think it's better served for action photographers who also need reliable video functionality. But I'm not sure that it's the best use of money if you only plan to shoot video. But I'm hoping this is a sign of things to come for Canon and that more affordable bodies of the future will be as video friendly as this R3 is. All right, I'm done.